Hello, my name is Zander Gibney, and today I'm going to be giving all of you my presentation on my project for activating innovation in society. So I'm going to first go into some of the research design that I had for this project. Then I'm going to go into the insights that I gained from my secondary sources. And finally, I'm going to go into the bias and ethical considerations I would have had to make for this project. So first, my research design. Uh, my research topic, of course, was that I discussed in class was going to be movie-going experiences, or like movie experience in general. More specifically, I wanted to dive into why movie theaters are still such a popular attraction with the current rise of streaming services. So with this topic in mind, my sample frame would have been adults who regularly see movies in theaters. I was thinking at least 5 times in the past year, just for a good baseline number. Uh, so with that, my research question that I developed would have been, why do people still want to see films in theaters after the rise of the wide array of streaming services now available? Bringing off that topic, some interview questions that I would have used to dive into people's real feelings towards this would have been, why do you enjoy watching movies? Could you tell me about a recent memorable experience you had at a movie theater? What is your favorite movie theater and why? And what types of movies do you prefer to watch in a movie theater as opposed to at home? And I feel like these questions are just good open-ended questions that could really dig deep into people's like true motivations for where they want to watch a movie and the meaning that they give to this kind of stuff. So next, I wanted to go over some of the information and insights that I gained from reviewing my secondary sources. These are just some brief insights that I gained from these articles that I chose while setting up my research. While some of the articles don't exactly discuss exactly what the focus of my research is, they all did give really good insight into the current state of the film industry as it applies to streaming services. So they're all extremely helpful. So the 3 things that I noticed, number one, is that there seems to be a growing tension between films released on streaming services and film festivals that they get nominated at. One example that an article gave was at the Cannes Film Festival, which is giant, huge, like artsy film festival for those who don't know. So typically at Cannes, they want the films to be released at local theaters at the same time when it's nominated or before it's nominated. However, at the 2017 festival, 2 of the nominations, Okja and the Meyerowitz stories, they were both Netflix exclusives. So they didn't exactly meet that requirement. That wasn't really a requirement. Long story short, the heads of the festival weren't exactly super happy about this just because they were streaming service exclusives. So they changed the rules for the next year, specifically for streaming services, which I thought was a really interesting development. Secondly, the rise of streaming videos seems to be giving independent filmmakers more of a chance to thrive in this industry, which I thought was a really interesting idea. So 2 of the articles I read discuss some of the difficulties that independent filmmakers have when they're trying to budget their films. Marketing for theaters to get tickets sold and not having that like solid foundation of trust that like they're going to be able to be funded really has turned off a lot of indie filmmakers in the past. However, streaming services seem to have turned out to be a much more stable option for smaller filmmakers who aren't backed by major studios. So streaming services are giving artists a bigger voice than ever, small-time artists, which is, I think, a really interesting notion to consider with this kind of stuff. So finally, the third insight that I took from this was that one article I read pointed to the conclusion that for a lot of people, their decision on how they're going to watch a movie really came down to how reliable the service is. The article mainly focused on DVDs and Blu-rays versus streaming services, but I think like some of the conjectures can also relate to movie theaters when you just digest it a little bit more, because it's a lot of the same like evoked emotions from the 2. So the article's arguments was that DVDs and Blu-rays and watching movies in the theater to an extent always guarantee like a smooth experience of viewing from start to finish. Streaming services rely, with the article's consideration, they rely heavily on your bandwidth and your internet connection, which aren't always the most reliable and stable for a lot of people. And the people in the article discussed that DVDs and Blu-rays are a lot easier to navigate and provide a much smoother experience overall. Whether or not that's true for everyone has yet to be determined, but I thought it was really interesting insight. Uh, and another one of the arguments they made was exclusively about DVDs and Blu-rays, but the notion of actually owning the movie instead of just like owning the right to see it whenever. Because movies do get pulled off and put on to streaming services all the time. Uh, but that same notion of not truly owning it could be made against theatrical releases. The article really makes no conclusion on that front, but I think, with my own conjecture, I think that's a really interesting notion to take into this research. So finally, the difference bias and ethics considerations that I would have made and how I would have avoided them. So on the bias side of things, I feel like there actually could have been a great deal of bias on my hand because personally, I really enjoy seeing movies in theaters. And I much prefer it to staying home than watching a new movie on Hulu or Netflix. That's actually what made me really interested in this topic in the first place, is like my love of movie theaters. Uh, so I may have fixated too much on details that back up my opinions and not enough. I would have maybe ignored like some of the real insights of like what other people feel. Um, in order to avoid this, I would have just needed to recognize, like at the start of every interview, that every participant is going to have their own reasoning regarding their actions of like where they're going to watch a movie, and I needed to not bring my opinion into anything. On the ethics side of things, I didn't really anticipate any suggestive ethics at all that I would have had to take much into account as I performed this research. As long as I stayed open and honest about the purpose of the research, about it being for a class, that it's about ethnographic research, I might have had to explain what ethnography truly is, maybe, but just being open like that. And of course, gaining consent, paramount, and like, I needed to make sure they were comfortable with like sharing their movie experiences and their opinions on film to me. As long as I met those big requirements and of course some of the other ethical considerations that we discussed in class, I did not see any possible issues that would have come from my research. So in conclusion, today I gave a brief overview of what my final research topic would have been and how it would have been formed. So first I looked at the research design, then the insights that I got from my secondary sources, and finally the different bias and ethical considerations I would have taken into account. It really is unfortunate that we were unable to move forward with this project overall, but I am glad I was still able to share what I would have done with everyone else in the class. Thank you.